Hello, my name is Page Provan. I'm the Managing Director of Page Provan, Family and Fertility Lawyers. We're a firm of lawyers that practices exclusively in family and fertility law, where our office is in central Brisbane, but we have clients throughout Australia, in fact throughout the world. I want to talk to you today about a particular brand of parenting cases which are called relocation cases. Now, what relocation cases mean is where one parent wants to move with their child or children to live a considerable distance from the other parent, usually either interstate or overseas. And it's quite common for a parent to want to do so. They're not required to show that they have reasons to do so, although that will usually come up in the course of the evidence. And in each of the relocation cases, the court needs to consider what's in the best interests of the child or children. Now, a relocation case wouldn't apply to someone who was, for example, moving suburbs in a city. They usually apply to people who want to relocate a considerable distance away, meaning that the other parent may not be able to spend as much time with the children as they have previously. The question comes up from time to time, if a parent wants to relocate, do they need to seek the consent of the other parent? And the answer to that, it is usually a good idea. Now, there are some cases where a person may be advised that they don't need to seek the consent of the other parent, and that would usually apply to cases where there's been a history of domestic violence and the parent who has the children fears for the safety of either themselves and or the children. In those sort of cases, it might actually be desirable and in the best interests of the children not to seek the consent of the other parent. But those sort of cases are exceptional, and you should consult a lawyer before making that decision. In most cases, if you wish to relocate with children, you should seek the consent of the other parent, and you should do that well before you intend to relocate, because if the other parent doesn't agree with the relocation, you may need to make an application to court to seek orders from the court to enable you to relocate with the children. Now, what happens if you relocate without the consent of the other parent? What can happen is that there can be an application to court either by the parent who has the primary care of the children or by the other parent to require the custodial parent to come back to where they were living until such time as the court can determine whether they should be permitted to relocate. Now, if a parent with the children does relocate without the consent of the other parent, the court won't always require them to come back. There may be cases, if it's shown to be in the best interest of the children, where a court will allow the parents to stay where they've moved to. Now, different requirements apply if you relocate overseas with children. If a parent relocates overseas with children without the consent of the other parent to what's called a Hague Convention country, then the other parent can approach what's called the central authority, which is a government department, and arrange to have the children returned to Australia using the Hague Convention requirements. Now, some countries are signatories to the Hague Convention. Most of the Western countries are signatories to the Hague Convention, and it applies to countries like New Zealand, England, the United States, etc. Now, not all countries which are signatories to the Hague Convention necessarily comply with it, and there are some countries, even though they're signatories, won't always comply. So if you're considering relocating overseas with children, you should consult a lawyer before you do so to find out whether the country that you're intending to go to is a Hague Convention country or not. If a parent with the children relocates to a country which is not a Hague Convention country, then the other parent may have considerable difficulty in getting the children back to Australia. and it would very likely fall on the courts of that foreign jurisdiction to make a decision whether the children should be required to return to Australia with that parent. So in considering a relocation, as I said, it's important to get some legal advice from a lawyer who specialises in family law. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you for watching, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Bruce Provan from Page Provan, Family and Fertility Lawyers.